Yes, we are talking about it. Yes, we are talking about race, racism, the whole thing, the whole thing that everybody, especially when they're in a room full of people, everybody just tippy toes around it, because it's just so uncomfortable. And when it's stated, it has to be something that's stated in these acceptable doses, these digestible doses, not in its full dose, because it just makes people feel so uncomfortable. Well, we're talking about it here. So, hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. You're probably wondering, why does she want to talk about this? Because we need to talk about it. It's a topic. We need to discuss it as society. It's something that affects how people are treated on a daily basis. It affects how people are treated in hospital, how people are treated and viewed just in general, So we are going to have the discussion here. So let's just get into it. So, most people will ask, like, what is racism? Like, what is racism? If you've never experienced racism, you probably don't know what it is. But it's when somebody discriminates, it's a discrimination. Somebody discriminates against somebody or against you based on the belief, just on the belief, just by looking at you, that one's race is superior. Racism is a very totally irrational dislike. It doesn't make any sense, because it's something that when you examine it deeper, it's partly based on people feeling threatened, by your race. When they look at you, when they look at people who look like they feel threatened. If you look in past history, many European philosophers were outright racists, and their philosophies that they were coming about up with, and putting out in the world were very racially biased, very racially untrue. And think about it, this information was what was being used to build society and ideologies, and being read in books, all over the world. And some of those books still exist till today. I'll give you a perfect example of one that I can think about, and his name is David Hume. He's a Scottish philosopher. He had a very, very interesting way of showing how racism can partly stem from feeling threatened. He had a very interesting way of showing how threatened he felt. And I suspect, that he had these feelings and he had to say them. His exact words were, "I suspect that the Negroes, and in general all species of men, to be naturally inferior to whites. No ingenious manufactures among them, no arts, no sciences." Wow. When you hear those words, no ingenious, we bear nothing, we bear no good fruits, we are good for nothing, you kind of just want to go, no sir, excuse me, like, who are you talking about? But history has this deep hunger and need to depict Africa as this dark continent, this place with no history, because before the so-called literacy era of Europeans, we as Africans had no history because it had not been written. When in fact, the truth is, before the rise of the Egyptians and the Sumerians, there was a wonderful civilization in the fertile African Sahara. This wonderful civilization was happening in a place called Karga Oasis. It's the west of what was considered Nubia, where the Nubians came from. We were Africans, dark-skinned black Africans. This is where people developed the world's oldest known forms of writing. These writings date back to as early as 5000 BC. Some even date as back as 1500 BC. So, yes, writing came from Africa. The oldest forms of writing come from Africa. Oh yes, as African people, we love our oral culture and traditions, but the dominance of European languages through colonialism and other factors have led to the misconception that languages of Africa either have no written form or have been put into writing very recently. This is really not true. This is vital, guys. It's vital because our identity is part of this. Our identity has been tampered with. Our identity has been attempted to be erased, to be forgotten, not considered in the history books, And that has actually had a very huge impact on some of our people, who actually believe that we have no valuable addition to society, and they're ashamed to be black. They're ashamed to be African. You see these people, cowering in the back of rooms when the topic of being black or African comes up, they're not at the forefront, or they don't rise up and go, well, I know what I know, because they are misinformed. Well, let me tell you something. If you are misinformed and if this is all new to you, we as Africans are an integral part of history. We are the origins of man, the origins of many things. There is so much information out there. I will be doing a series on identity as Africans. This is the first video. And when I say Africans, I mean African Americans, I mean Black Caribbeans, I mean the African born in Africa, all of us. Every melanated being of African descent is who I'm talking to. I'm doing this so that whoever watches this, whatever race you are, whatever background you are, even if you think you are not racist, even if you think you are not racially inclined to be racist, educate yourself on the history of others. But especially my people of African descent, wherever you're going to watch this video from, research who you are. You are descendants of kings and queens. It is a fact. It is not something that is made up. Do not be mentally oppressed that your ancestors were of no value or no effect in this world. That is not true. It is a very untrue narrative that has been spun in history. So, where does racism come from? Where did it start? Racism started and was inspired by Europeans when they traveled abroad. They thought it would be a great idea to create, and do something that had never been done before in history, which was to classify and rank the diversity of the world's plants, animals, and people. Now, for many of these European travelers, racism to them was a very coherent way of looking at large civilization differences. So, racism arose or came from a theory of Western civilization superiority. It did not begin when slavery began. No, it began as a theory of Western civilization superiority. Slavery happened because of it. It was just an addition to it. This ranking of people, who was beneath who was above who. I hope this is all making sense, because I know that if it's all, new information, it's a little bit of a lot of information. But, we need to talk about these things. I also want people to know that a lot of research has actually gone into understanding racism, especially from people who fought for civil rights, who fought for freedom, who fought to be free from colonialism. These people were not only fighting physically, but they were fighting mentally. As scholars, they wanted to find out and understand and make sense of what they were going through, what they were fighting, the reasoning behind this horror of racism. And they came to a very damning conclusion that racism was an integral, permanent, and indestructible feature of Western psyche. And when you look at the Western world, it has not been able to transcend or go beyond the race issue. And because they haven't been able to go beyond it, they propose to institutionalize racism. They proposed to institutionalize it. So most of us nowadays, most people call it systematic racism. This system has allowed what is called race management. Race management happens with jobs, education, credit, housing, you name it. Race management is in full effect and has been for a very long time. So when you look at all this race management, this racism, who does racism favor? Who does racism favor? Racism favors white people. It favors them in a way that they can never understand. It's what we call white privilege. White privilege is a right, an immunity, a benefit enjoyed beyond the advantages of most. Most white people believe that privileges are a daily experience, that they are universally available to everybody. But that is not what we are talking about here. We are talking about unearned power. Power that has not been earned. It has been given to you. It's been bestowed upon you. It's been granted to you from birth. This unearned power that has been gained systematically. Part of having white privilege is having greater access to power and resources that people of color could never. Just purely on the basis of skin color, doors are open to white people that are not to other people. If you are sitting there and you think, or believe that there is no such thing as systematic racism, that's fine. But I just want to say racism is a system. And we can take a trip down memory lane to just show you how far back this system goes. History is filled with examples of the purposeful construction of a systematic structure that grants privileges to white people and withholds them from others. We'll start with one example, an example of, for centuries, the law permitted and very intentionally confirmed the holding of black people as slaves, as property. The law is part of the system. The law allowed another human to own another human as a slave and property. Second example we can go to is how white people, in the past believed that their destiny was to own the land, of many people, of which most of us currently live on. Even though owning that land required to forcibly remove the native people who had lived there for centuries. Just think about that. Another example we can go to is, look at how the breaking apart of the black family during slavery, sending a mother there, sending a father there, sending the children there, a baby over there. Just the separation of that. It is a systematic thing. Racism is systematic. Another example is how, they chose to withhold the ability to read from Africans so that they could not reproduce any of their culture or function well enough in the so-called literate society to change their own status quo as humans. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking systematic racism doesn't exist, there is a history of it, So who does this racism, benefit? White people. But why are the majority of white people not challenging racism? That is because white people need racism to survive in society. Without racism, they would not be able to survive. They would need to start from scratch, like everybody has done, and they wouldn't know where to go or where to start because Racial inequality is something they have never had to struggle with or process. It would be a total devastation of their supremacy, privilege, comfort, and the thought of not being the higher being with the privileges and everything that it gives you is almost torturous. Whether people want to believe it or not, or admit to it or not, understand one thing: racism is not something that bad people do. Racism is a practice. You understand? White people are not taught their history. They are not confronted with their past unless somebody else brings it up. Very, very few people will bring it up, but as a society in whole, they are not taught about it. Imagine if they taught it in schools. Imagine if history lessons were the truth of what happened. Wow, I can just imagine. It is not taught in schools. It's not taught because of white fragility. It isn't taught because society has to protect the fragility of white people. There is so much tension and so much anxiety and so much charge and so much defensiveness with white people around the topic of race. So much so that when they are challenged about it, they shut down very quickly or glaze over it or tune out. Even happens, let's say if you have white friends and you are that black friend or that person who brings up race, you become an issue. You don't want to hang out with you. They don't hang out with you anymore because they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. All these are functions to protect their position and worldviews in place. White people have not had to build their racial stamina as they've been ever exempt from ever needing it. Some white people are either not aware of their privilege or can never admit to themselves of their privilege. And then they become highly fragile in conversations about race. The smallest amount of racial stress is intolerable to most white people. The topic of race is actually a stress-inducing one. Hence, the defensiveness, which then allows them to go back into that cocoon to their racial comfort and not have to have the conversation of race. White fragility protects white supremacy. So, what do we do with all of this as black people, as African people, as people of color? What do we do? We have to take our power back. So how should Africans, black people, be tackling racism or the system? There is so many different ways we can do this, and it's all individual. It's very all individually based, and as a community as well. I would say the starting point I would say is teach your children, teach yourself who you are, what you're about. The more we continue to chew up and swallow the untrue false narratives, the more we are creating identity traumas, doubt, and fear about who we are. Guys, I was born in Zimbabwe, one of the most powerful kingdoms to ever exist in Africa. Historically, I think Zimbabwe is a kingdom, an ancient kingdom. Went through to Mozambique, South Africa, covered a lot of the Southern African areas. We moved here when I was 14. I was very fortunate that I had parents with a very strong sense of identity of who they were as African people. And my parents never stopped being Zimbabwean. I read, write fluently my language. And because my parents never stopped being Zimbabwean, it meant that I never stopped being one, no matter where we were living. In our house, I remember, our white family friends coming over for dinner. And my dad, I remember telling us, never compromise your culture to please someone. I remember the food we cooked was authentic Zimbabwean food. They ate it. They were inquisitive and they enjoyed it. We never were sitting there and going, oh, just in case they don't like it, we've got a substitute. No, that never happened. I remember we would go and sit in the lounge after we've had our meal and we wouldn't watch something very English. No, not at all. My dad had this most amazing collection of all the TV dramas from home from Zimbabwe. If you're Zimbabwean and you're watching, you know, we had Gringo, Mukadota, Paraffin. Yes, you know, we watched those with our English family friends, you know, because we as a family used to watch those as a family most evenings as entertainment, you know, and our English friends, they enjoyed them. They embraced it. And I don't ever remember feeling uncomfortable in my own home watching these programs or these dramas with them. I didn't. It's comedy. Everybody understands comedy. So it was our family being ourselves in our home, and our white friends were immersed in our world. You know, my parents would talk about Zimbabwe to them, the history, the beauty. There was never any shame. I never saw shame when my parents talked about my country, where we came from, you know. And no doubt, all of them wanted to go to Zimbabwe. You know, the more they got to know us, the more they also were honest about their own racism and privileges and ideologies they had, you know, about how we lived as people, you know. My parents were basically teaching us, people would either accept you for who you are or they won't. Just be yourself, but your true, authentic self. You know, my dad would make this drink we call my hell. You know, it's a home brew, and honestly, my dad tried everything he could to make us feel like at home, away from home, you know. And our English friends would come over and they would try this maheo, you know, this African brew, and they loved it. And let me tell you something, we forged some unbreakable family bonds with, you know, those that accepted us and we accepted them. I remember even when my dad died, at his funeral, there was like this beautiful flower wreath. I remember it came from Uncle Bobby and Auntie Anna, and they had the words Mr. Paraffin on them. You know, this comedy that they had watched first time coming to our house. It was to symbolize what they had learned, how my family had taught them to accept others. You know, it's okay to live alongside each other. Let's learn about each other. You having people of the same race as me doesn't make you a racial expert. Research. Ask those around you about, you know, how other people live. If you're Black and African, research about your ancestors. Seek those who can give you knowledge. Knowledge is power. Understand that racism is a system and not the state of your race. Your race is not beneath anyone else's race, but only you can elevate yourself and your mind if you feed yourself the true information you deserve to know. But let's be clear, no apologies coming about the past, no acknowledgement is coming about the atrocities, nothing. It all rests on us taking our power back. Those that created racism will not fight it, whether it's from their past. They will not fight it. They will not dismantle it. They expect you to fight it. It's your issue. It's for you to fight daily and keep fighting, because they need racism. They are not going to dismantle it. You know, did you know that the brain of a person who faces microaggressions on a daily basis has the same trauma as a soldier who has gone to war? Just think about it. The PTSD of it all. The PTSD of it all. However, you are told you must get over it. We cannot move on as a society if the past has not even begun to be addressed. Africans are still trying to deal with the traumas caused. You're told, rise up, get on with your life, fight racism. The raping of our women, the raping of our men, the raping of our children, the raping of the African continent. And no one will address this, but we must just move on. The conversation needs to happen. Let it be taught in schools. Let history be taught, the true history be taught. But if you are African and of African descent, teach your children your true history. Teach yourself your true history. Take back your power. No one is going to do that for you. You are going to have to do it, and you are going to have to let it shine, because you come from kings and queens. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. My next video, I'm going to be talking about, microaggressions, how they affect people on a daily basis, So if you enjoyed this video, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on my next video. So thank you for watching. Bye.